Right. Let's start a new Masechta. Baruch Hashem, we're starting Maseches Kiddushin Daf Beis, starting at a new Mishnah. Some of the ideas we're going to be seeing in this Masechta are familiar to us. We've spoken about Kiddushin throughout Shas probably hundreds of times. And of course, the most basic construct that we need to know about marriage is that the Yiddish marriage is in two stages. Kiddushin is an act of betrothal, not the secular American version of betrothal, which has no halachic teeth at all. This is an actual act that restricts her from marrying anybody else, as we will soon see. And the second act is the chuppah or nisuin, where they go through the Sheva brachos. The interruption of reading a get is not because of, it's interrupted. What? What did I say?
Yeah.
Wow.
Haread mekudeshes li haread mutaras l'chol adam. It's like a very nice. But my rule is I'm not starting over. So let's continue. Yeah, seriously. No, it's mama's true. So when we have people reading the Ksuba in between, that's just to separate the two. But Lamaisa, the fundamental aspects of Kiddushin and of marriage in general is Kiddushin followed by Nisuin. We're going to start by learning about Kiddushin. The first Mishnah opens right at the top. Ha'isha niknes b'shlosha drachim. A woman can be acquired in three different methods, as we'll see. V'kona es atzma, and she gets herself back. Namely, she can get out of marriage. B'shtei drachim. Let's go through the first set. Niknes b'kesef b'shtar u'b'bia. A woman is able to be acquired in Kiddushin through money. That's haret mekudeshes b'tabasu kedas Moshe b'Yisrael. Through shtar, by writing it down in a document. B'bia, or if the couple is intimate l'shem Kiddushin, that also works. And b'kesef b'shame omer b'dinar b'shava dinar. That's a specific coin with a specific amount of money. And we paskin like the latter shita v'esil omer b'pruta b'shava pruta. If you'll remember, one of the cases we saw right at the end of Maseches Gittin is this guy tried to marry a woman with a small amount of fruit left on the pit, but it was less than the Shava Pruta. Shava Pruta is a few pennies. It's really difficult to find something that isn't a Shava Pruta, a safety pin. I'm just saying it's like small, little, tiny things. Good. The kama hi pruta, how much is this pruta? Echad mishmona be'isar ha'italki. Rashi says that this is made out of silver. V'chule. The kones atzma beget ubemisa sabal. A woman can acquire herself back. Namely, she is again no longer married through a get if the husband provides her with an appropriate halachic document. See the last 90 blot that we've learned. Ubemisa sabal, and as well with the death of the husband, she instantly falls back to being a single woman, and she is now an eligible bachelorette to get married. Lastly, in our Mishnah, Hayavama niknes b'bia. Yavama doesn't really get married through typical forms. On a Torah level, she gets married through bia. We do have a rabbinic form of marriage, as we've spoken about with the Yavama, called Maimer. That's true, but it's rabbinic in nature. But Midoraisa, the mechanism of marriage for a Yavama is when they are intimate. The kones asma bechalitza uve misas hayavam. When does a Yavama get her life back? When is she now single again? That is if chalitza is done, if she does chalitza, or b'misas hayavam, if the Yavam dies, and of course there are no other brothers. For the first blot today, we're going to be analyzing some of the language as to why we've chosen, why Rebbe chose some of the language in our Mishnah as we have it. For example, says the Gemara, 7 lines from the bottom, Ha'isha niknes. Why over here in this parak does it start with Ha'isha niknes, that a woman can be acquired? Rashi says in the beginning of the second parak, why is it over there, Datani Ha'ish Mekadesh? Why are the languages inconsistent? Just, we like consistency, we like patterns, we like poetry. Make it work. Why did you change your language? So why is it that over there we said the Tana Ish Mekadesh, says the Gemara, Mishum de Kabay lemisne kesef. The reason why we wanted to make sure we had the word kinyan in our Mishnah, and therefore Ha'isha Niknes, is because we're talking about a transaction of Harat Mekudeshes Libetabasu Kedas Moshe B'Yisrael with a financial transaction. The kesef minal, and how do we know that kesef actually works for an acquisition? Says the Gemara, a very important Gzera Shava, as we're going to see throughout this parak. P.S. This is the longest parak in Shas. It's in I think it's 41 blot, 40, it's very long, whatever. So it says the Gemara, B'kesef minale, how do we know that the kinyan works when if a man were to give a coin of some kind, something that's Shava Pruta to a woman that they're married? Gamar, we have a tradition of kicha, miste Ephron, from the story of Ephron when Avram needed to bury his wife, ksiv hacha. In one pasuk it says, ki yikach ish isha, the word kach, yikach is in there, which is to purchase. And by Ephron, it has the same language again. The kicha ikri kinyan. How do we know that kicha? Okay, you showed me that kicha and kicha are the same. That's great. How do we know that kicha is a kinyan? Asher kana Abraham. There we see the word kana, and then we know by Ephron he said kach in a previous sentence, as we just saw in the previous line, and therefore we know that it works. By same inami on the top of Beis Mid Beis. Another possibility as to how we know that the word kach has anything to do with kinyan is because sados b'kesef yiknu, that you can purchase things with money, and therefore tani, that's why our Mishnah says ha'isha niknes. Great. So says the Gemara, if it's true that our Mishnah needs to be the way that it is because of kesef, so then v'nisnei hasam, then in the beginning of the second parak where it says ha'ish mekadesh, why don't we change that language to ha'ish kona? Stay consistent. You've determined that in our parak, in our Mishnah, in the Resha, in the beginning of our Mishnah, that it has to say isha niknes because of kesef. But then fine, why don't we stay consistent? And in the second parak, also talk about ha'ish kona. Why don't we have this language be consistent about kinyan in both this parak and in the second parak? The Gemara says, because me'ikara, in the first Mishnah, our Mishnah, tani lishna deoraisa. We're going to start with the stronger language. Our Mishnah starts with a language that's a kinyan deoraisa. If a man walks over to a woman and says, Harab mekudesh asli, with whatever that's a shava pruta kedas Moshe v'Yisrael, she is fully married, and in that, she is not allowed to marry anybody else. And that if she sleeps with someone at this point who she's not allowed to, she may be killed. It's pretty severe. She's actually not allowed to sleep with her husband at the moment. And nowadays we do at our weddings, we do Kiddushin and Nisuin just moments apart, separated by the Kriyas Ksuba. But back in the day, as we learned in Maseches Ksubas, there was often 12 months of time between the Kiddushin and the Nisuin, a long time. But today they're very close to one another. So we started with the language in our Mishnah, which is the Oraisa, Ulevisov, Tini Lishna Derabanan. In the second parak, when it says Ish Mekadesh, that is a language that is Derabanan. Did you ever wonder why Kiddushin is called Kiddushin? Sanctification. So here's a Gemara. This is Margala Bapuma. You need to store this in your pocket when people start talking about Kiddushin, so you can pull this out of the Shabbos table. Umay Lishna Derabanan. What is the rabbinic language around Kiddushin? Says the Gemara, De Asar La Akule Alma Kehektish. A woman becomes usher to others, just like when you are makdish something. If I'm makdish my material, my clothing, my wealth to the Beis HaMikdash, it's mukdash. No one can touch it. Same is true by Anisha. The language of Kiddushin that we use by a woman is because she is like hektish, and that once the husband is makdish, makadesh his wife. Once a person is makdish their belongings, it becomes usher like hektish. So too, she becomes usher to everybody else. That's where we get the language of Kiddushin from. Very good. Says the Gemara, okay, v'nisni hacha ha'ish koneh. In our Mishnah, it says ha'isha niknes. But who's doing the kinyan over here? It's not the woman. Why are we saying the woman is acquired? Why don't we say the man acquires? That would have made a lot more sense. Says the Gemara, that can't be. Our Mishnah cannot say ha'ish nikne, ha'ish koneh, because mishum de kaboy lemisna seifa. What do we see at the end of our Mishnah? It's really not the end, but it's the middle of our Mishnah. It says v'koneh es atzma, she can acquire herself back, and that is bidida. That's referring to her having nothing to do with the husband per se. She acquires herself back, and therefore tananami reisha bidida. We also have in the Resha, that's something that's referring to. So we can't say ha'ish koneh in our Mishnah. We need it to be ha'isha niknes, because the Seif of the Mishnah is talking about a kinyan that only applies to her, which is she's getting her life back. He's not making a kinyan when they get divorced. He's untethering the cars, and there's uncoupling. They're done. Their relationship's over. So therefore, that wouldn't work. Okay. The Nisne, why doesn't our Mishnah say ha'ish koneh umakne, that a man acquires and can allow her to acquire by separating her? Says because mishum deika misa sabal the lav ihu kamakne, because one of the ways that a woman earns her freedom again is when the husband dies, and that's not the husband doing anything in regards to uncoupling the two, but rather means shemayahu demaknila. That's a Kodesh Baruch Hu's decision. When a husband dies, and then the couple's over. But that's not something where the husband is makne. A husband is not makne her back to her own self after he dies. So therefore, the language is wrong. There's another possible answer over here. Itana kone, had it said kone over here, then hava mina filu bal korcha, that maybe a person can get married bal korcha. A man could force a woman to get married. Therefore, tana ha'isha niknes, the woman has to be part of the process. That's what we refer to demidaita in shalom midaita lo. That only when they marry from their own das, from her own das, that's when the marriage actually counts. You cannot force a marriage. No such thing. So if a man says, take this or die, and she takes it, they're still not married. It doesn't matter because you forced it. That's not how it works. We have a similar halacha that we were just speaking about a get ma'usa. You can't, there's scenarios where you have to be very, this time your husband actually, because we can't force a husband to give again. Okay. That's the Gemara. So far, we're a third of the way down. Says the Gemara, I don't understand something in our Mishnah. Umay irya datani shalosh. Our Mishnah says that there are, if you look back in our Mishnah, it opens ha'isha niknes b'shalosh drachim. A woman can be acquired in three ways. Now, unlike most of Hebrew, where the word shlosha, or let's say, what word would it be? Any word that ends with a hey, right? That's typically female, not with numbers. With numbers, it's the reverse. Shalosh, which is lacking the hey, is feminine, nekeva, and shlosha is masculine. So here the Gemara is bothered because the actual kinyan, even though we're referring to it through the lens of a woman, because as we spoke about earlier, it's bidida, it has to be on her terms. But why is it that we use the language of shalosh, which is a language that is feminine, lisni shlosha? It should have said shlosha because the man's the one doing the kinyan. Says the Gemara, because mishum de kabayla misni derech v'derech lashon nekevahi, because the word derech is a female word, which is we wouldn't have thought off the cuff, but that's what the Gemara says. We'll see soon that there are some conflicting reports about the word derech, but as it stands, the word derech is nekeva, and if the word derech is nekeva, then we need the word shalosh to be nekeva because the sentence has to be grammatically correct. You will let them know the path that they shall go on. Haderech and ba, that shows us that the word derech is feminine, and if the word derech is feminine, and our Mishnah says Haisha niknes b'shlosha drachim, b'shalosh drachim, so therefore shalosh has to be in the feminine because derech is a feminine word. The word derech at its shoresh is doesn't. No, we're not looking at it that way. No, the word derech inherently, that was the raya that was just brought over here. What does our Mishnah say? Yeah, but no, the raya over here is that derech fundamentally at its shoresh is considered to be a masculine, a feminine word. And also the yud mem at the end of a word versus vav saf is not always a raya because sometimes it flips based on the previous word. So that's also just a grammatical thing. Right, exactly. So because that flips depending on the previous word, so inherently we have to look at the shoresh. That's what the Gemara is saying over here, is that the word derech has a feminine implication in the pasuk of v'hodata lehem es haderech yelchuba, third of the way down. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second. I know a source, says the Gemara, that shows us that derech is another type of gender. The alaha ditnan, should be ditnan, it's a Mishnah. This is a Mishnah that is found in Zavin. B'shiva drachim bodkenes hazav. Well, what's a zav? A zav is a man. So there we see the word derech, and we see the word zav. And look at the first word in that Mishnah, b'shiva. Was that masculine or feminine? That's masculine. So here we see that there's a masculine usage of the word, of a number, next to the word derech, which implies that derech is a masculine word. So therefore, says the Gemara, why don't we say nisni sheva? If what you're saying is that derech is always female, and therefore it should be a female reference and a nekeva number, then it should say sheva and not shiva with a hey at the end. Says the Gemara, mishum de kabay lemisnei derech ve'ashkechan derech the ikri lashon zachar. We have precedent that sometimes the word zachar itself is a masculine word. In other words, the word derech kind of pivots. It really depends on what's going on in the context of the pasuk. The word derech is not inherently nekeva or zachar. It really just depends on the context. Where do we see a usage of the word zachar that's purely masculine? In that case, we see shiva in the pasuk. Shiva with the hey at the end is masculine, and that is because the word derech in this pasuk must be masculine. So it says the Gemara, if that's true, then we have a more fundamental issue, which is that the psukim, the word derech seems to not have a proper understanding. It says the Gemara halfway down, if this is true, and we're going to be going until 4 lines from the bottom of the page. We have a double stira. We have some psukim where derech seems to be flipped, sometimes zachar, sometimes nekeva, and the other way as well. We seem to have a scenario where sometimes the Mishnayos don't agree. So the Gemara says, kroya hadade lo kasha. The psukim are not a problem. In one case, we're talking about Torah. That's the pasuk of Vehodat Olehem es haderech yelchuva. This is a pasuk that is found in Sefer Shemos, which was talking about Torah. So the word Torah is a feminine word, and therefore, in that case, the word zachar, the word derech, in that case, is a feminine word. Dechsiv Torah Hashem Tamima Meshivas Nafesh. Look at the word Torah Hashem is Tamima. That is a feminine word. Therefore, Kasav Labalashon Nekeva. That's why in that pasuk it says the word Nekeva. So derech there is Nekeva. Hasam over there in the pasuk de b'milchama kai, over there when we're talking about a milchama, which is a pasuk that we referenced earlier of b'derech echad yetzu elecha v'shiva derachim yanusa lefanecha. So the darko shel ish la'asos milchama ve'in darko shel isha la'asos milchama. Men are the ones who typically are involved in battle and not women, and therefore kasav labalash and zachar. So therefore, there's no steer in the psukim. The word derech does in fact depend on the context of the pasuk. And then the Gemara also says 2 lines before the wide lines, Masnisan Hadade Nami, Masnisan Hadade also lokashan. Why? Hacha de lagabe Isha Kai. In one pasuk, when we're talking about a woman, Katani Labalash and Nekeva. One of the Mishnahs, our Mishnah is talking about a Nekeva. Hasam de lagabe Ish, but the Mishnah that we learned about Beshiv, about the Zav, that was talking about a man. So then Hasam de lagabe Ish Kai, first of the long lines, the Darko Shal Ishli Badek. Only men have to check their Zav. There's a pouch that we've learned about in Shas, where there's a pouch that wraps around the aver, around the gid, to make sure that we can see the discharges to see what's going on. So only a man has to do that. The ein darka shel isha libadek, a woman doesn't have to do that. Why doesn't a woman have to check for her zav discharges? Because says the Gemara, to ha'isha nami ba'onis metama, it doesn't matter why she sees it. Whatever she sees, even if it's ba'onis, she's going to be tmeya. Therefore, because in that Mishnah, which was talking about the Mishnah that was talking about a zav, where he's beshiva with a hey at the end, drachim, beshiva drachim bodkin as zav, therefore tani lashon zachar. So the Gemara skirts out of the issue where the word derech can be understood in both ways, and it really very much depends on context. And says the Gemara, my time tani shalosh. Why is it that you said shalosh? What did we just say? It was because mishum drachim, because we said that derech was a feminine word. Says the Gemara, what's with the derech? Just drop the word derech and just use the right gender term. Why are we doing this? Says the Gemara, nisni dvarim v'nisni shlosha. Instead of saying drachim, say dvarim. Ha'isha niknes b'shlosha dvarim instead of drachim, and then problem solved. Go back to the appropriate gender reference that you need in the Mishnah and move on. Nisni dvarim v'nisni shlosha. Says the Gemara, you can't do that. Mishum de kabayla misnei bia ubia ikri derech. We can't do that because one of the ways I should say that a woman can get Kiddushin because of shtar ubia, because that's through bia, and bia referenced in the psukim uses the word derech. Where do we see this? The pasuk says in Sefer Mishlei, the pasuk says derech gever be'alma, the way of a man is with a woman. So that's a reference to Tashma Shemitah. So we see the word derech is being used there. So therefore we need a derech in our Mishnah. And as well another pasuk, Kain derech isha mina efes, another pasuk. This is also found in Mishlei, the next pasuk, and it is the derech of an isha to be mina efes, that under certain circumstances a woman may be tempted to be dishonest. There too, the word derech is a reference to bia. So because of the fact that we see that derech is being used as a reference to Tashma Shemitah, we cannot swap out the word drachim in our Mishnah for dvarim. And therefore, because of that, okay, so then because the drachim, it has to be in our Mishnah. Because drachim is female, therefore the word shalosh is going to be female and not shlosha. So says the Gemara, Hateinach bia. I understand that you have a word association between bia and derech, that makes sense. But kesef ishtar, ma'ikal memar, the other two forms of a woman gaining kiddushin is kesef and shtar, and there the psukim don't refer to kesef and shtar related to the word derech. So says the Gemara, mishum bia. You're right, but what do you want? What do you want me to do? Granted that you're right that those two, kesef and shtar, have nothing to do with the word derech, but bia does. So because bia is a part of the list, so therefore our Mishnah can't say dvarim, it has to say drachim. Okay, but the numbers don't make sense. V'tani tarte atuchada. But 2 of the 3 things are dvarim. 2 of the 3 things are not bia. You have bia, which of course is related to derech, and you have kesef and shtar, which is bichlal, not related to derech. Why don't we just say the majority rule, simple rule? Says the Gemara, hanach nami tzorach bia ninu. This is a lamdish line and requires its own digging and research. That these 2 things of kesef and shtar, they're also connected to bia, to figure out exactly what that means. It doesn't mean that the marriage is not consummated until Tashma Shemitah. These are the discussions about a woman covering her hair after the chuppah, or not covering her hair after the chuppah. Right? They've had Kiddushin, they're fully married, they can touch. In theory, they could sleep together, but she's not covering her hair. It's an oddity. In fact, Rav Willig paskins that a woman must cover her hair from before the chuppah, because the second the chuppah is over, she's 100% married. So that has to do with these kinds of discussions of what does this mean, hanach nami tzorach bia ninu, that when a woman is married through kesef and through shtar, that those are connected to bia. Same another possibility, and with this we will be closing, I think. Yeah. Same Hamani, who is the author of our Mishnah, Reb Shimon, Titania. We're 8 lines from the bottom. Reb Shimon Omer Bibnei Ma Amra Torah ki kach ish isha v'lo ksiv ki si kach isha leish. Why does it say in the Torah that a man takes a woman and not that a woman is taken by a man? It is the way of a man, darko, derech. It is the derech of a man to follow a woman, ve'ein darka shel isha lechazer al ish. And mashal la'adam she'avda lo aveda. If a person loses something, mi chozer lemi. Who's going to go look for the object? You think the object's going to go find its owner? No. Ba'al aveda, mechazer al aveda. He's got to go and look. So we assume that the dynamic between a man and a woman is that a man has to go look for the woman. She's his lost object, as it were, again, whatever the mashal means. But what we see from here is that the word derech is a reference to the process of finding a woman. That's why our Mishnah uses the word derech. We'll stop right here, Mir Hashem. We'll pick up tomorrow with Daf Gimel and Maseches Kiddushin. Wishing you all a beautiful night and Mazel Tov on the Siyum. Hashem, Mazel Tov.